It was renowned composer and piano virtuoso Frédéric Chopin that said, "I am not fitted to give concerts. The audience intimidates me. I feel choked by its breath, paralyzed by its curious glances, struck dumb by all those strange faces." I want you all to think of your average music student. They spend time and energy perfecting, and in some cases, money. As a music student, it involves years of study of centuries-old Western classical rules and theory that are reinforced by educators who have mastered the craft. These educators aim to guide and condition their students to develop a level of skillfulness, professionalism, and artistry, while knowingly or unknowingly instilling attitudes of perfectionism. Now, the music classroom can be a space for fun, expression, and creativity, but while the process can be filled with enjoyment, the public performance aspect of it can be somewhat nerve-wracking for many when the students' musical skills and level of perfectionism are tested. As a result, students experience psychological, emotional, and physiological stressors such as self-doubt, nervousness, and trembling that can debilitate their overall ability. This condition, otherwise known as music performance anxiety or MPA, occurs with musicians of all ages, both students and teachers. But researchers identify a major contributor of MPA. It's the music teacher and music instructor themselves. My qualitative research focuses on music educators, MPA, child and adolescent mental health, and implications on teaching practices. Data was collected through semi-structured interviews and coding processes. This research addresses the following questions. 1. To what extent do we perceive that we, as music teachers and instructors in the 21st century, are mitigating MPA in our students? 2. How do music teachers and instructors cope with their own MPAs, and how is that connected to their own musical upbringing and training? And 3. How do we feel that our actions are influenced by traditional music learning, teaching, and curriculum practices? Patston describes MPA as having an accelerated heart rate, cold extremities, inhibited gastrointestinal activity, sweating, dilated pupils, and a rush of adrenaline. Blood vessels constrict, which raises blood pressure, thus causing the body to heat up. The muscles of the diaphragm are shortened, which makes breathing shallow. A singer, for example, would experience a dry mouth, or if he or she is an instrumentalist, muscle tremors or stiffness in the hands and fingers would be expected. According to researchers, MPA in children is evident as early as 3 years old. MPA increases throughout adolescence and peaks at approximately 15 years of age. Young musicians may develop anxiety in response to the experience of the physiological effects of arousal, which they do not understand, particularly when performing in an uncomfortable environment. Now, research tells us one of the major contributors of MPA in school-age music students is the influence of their music teachers and private instructors. Specifically, it's traditional teaching practices that emphasizes perfectionism, teachers pushing hours of practice, and selecting musical repertoire with little to no connection to the students themselves. Historically, perfectionism plays a major role in Ontario's music education systems, especially conservatories, performing arts schools and academies, regional arts programs, and private institutions that emphasize Toronto's Royal Conservatory of Music, RCM, curriculum. These places are hubs in which perfectionism and competitiveness is highly evident. Most music instructors and their students focus intensively on perfecting technical skills lesson after lesson, leaving little to no room for other interpretations or student input. This is also paired with a limited amount of time during the lesson or class to develop other skills involved with performance. This reflects ideas presented by Stober and Eisman, saying, not only do musicians suffer from performance anxiety, but the constant pressure of musical lessons, practice, recitals, and performance may also lead to somatic complaints and emotional fatigue in young musicians. The avoidance of weakness is a major contributor. Traditionally, teachers rarely discuss MPA in the classroom, perhaps due to the stigma or appearance of weakness during the student's musical training. Sadly, this leads to the absence of coping strategies and absence of encouraging a growth mindset to mitigate or maintain MPA. Both certified and pre-service music educators often share a lack of formal training in music performance psychology. Patston states, music teachers would benefit from being more informed of the development trajectories of their students from a psychological perspective and the potential influence that teachers have. A contemporary music pedagogue provides lessons which provide a balanced view of progress and goal setting. In this sense, Patston describes that teachers need to see the importance of being informed of how teaching self-control and an upward progression or growth mindset contributes to the preparation, rehearsal, and developmental process of a student. Patston further adds, anecdotal evidence suggests that music teachers do little, if anything, to dispel that notion that MPA is somehow a normal part of being a musician. There is evidence that teachers may influence the development of anxiety in their students. Teachers and institutions may ultimately, unintentionally, facilitate the development of MPA. Furthermore, Bartel adds, teachers often stress performance expectations to the exclusion of other worthy musical goals, such as musical understanding, general musicianship, and creativity. Inserting some less challenging pieces into the repertoire will also lower the performance stress and allow for greater emphasis on the expressive and affective dimensions of the experience. Transparency of MPA is also lacking in the Ontario Arts Curriculum documents and the RCM syllabi. After a search of terms such as stage fright or music performance anxiety in Ontario Arts Curriculum documents, I could not find anything that explicitly addresses any of those terms. Shockingly, no evidence is found in the RCM syllabi addressing MPA at all. In-person, semi-structured interviews were conducted between October to December of 2019. I interviewed music educators, performing musicians, psychologists, and professionals. Data collected from my participant interviews revealed the following themes: proper preparation techniques for public performances, teacher influences in the student's musical training, and a lack of transparency in discussing MPA between teacher and student by pushing perfectionistic attitudes in their learning. Elaine touched on the importance of proper practicing and preparation, or lack thereof, and how that can lessen MPA. She says, how do you prepare? How did you learn the piece? Do you understand the piece? Because if you learn it mechanically, once you become nervous, you start thinking, okay, well, how do I do this? Because mechanically, you have nothing to hold on to. Everything gets lost. When you teach people, you should check if the student knows it well and how do they know it. Reflecting on Elaine's response, we can draw connections to what research revealed. Patston explains that a contemporary music pedagogue should provide a structured framework of influence which extends beyond the studio and covers such areas as practice process and efficacy, performance preparation, and debriefing. A contemporary music pedagogue encourages the students to read widely in the field of music performance, not merely the study of their instrument. Julie's response describes how the topic of MPA is avoided. I think it's important to talk about it. You know Barbra Streisand? She didn't perform for years because she was so scared. Unfortunately, it's still a taboo. It looks like a weakness. It shouldn't. It's a professional hazard. It's important to recognize that the conservatory's primary motivating factor is money. We either as teachers accept that as a natural consequence of what we do, or we push back on it and say, no, that's not what the kid is interested in. What needs to change is that structure is geared for the masses and students are individuals, so you have to always be willing to modify and change and move and adjust to what the kid needs. So what I've gathered from these findings is a conversation of identifying the needs and wants of the music student and how to protect them from the adverse effects of MPA related to traditional pedagogical styles, as well as pressures from the institution. Hess says, it seems that 21st century music education has reached a crossroads where, in order to move forward, we as music educators must re-envision all that music education is and has been. It is important that all music educators value mental health and well-being of students, perhaps looking through a culturally relevant lens, adding yoga and meditation to their classroom practices, substituting live performance tests for video recorded submissions, or carefully addressing mental health issues that affect all sorts of musicians. Equipping young students early with basic MPA knowledge can assist with how to navigate around those challenges. Further studies is needed that specifically addresses child and adolescent music students with this condition. This research also implies critiquing Ontario's music curriculum and the RCM syllabi regarding MPA. By creating more transparency and dialogue, we can see a shift in music education policies and growth in our young artists.